Astro has its own kind of persona, and the way I see it is like it's a puppy / child. It's very innocent, and it seems very, it really wants to help, and it gets very excited when it sees you, when it recognizes you, and that makes me feel really good. But then when you ask it a question like, what's the weather today or something, it switches to Alexa. So I have been interacting with this little puppy-like creature, and suddenly this adult woman is speaking to me right outside of the same screen.
Right,
so it's
yeah. That's odd.
A little jarring, but I'm sure they're working on that.
Hey everyone, I'm Brett Kinsella from Voicebot.ai, and one thing we like to do a couple times a year is just talk about the top stories. There's a lot going on in the voice AI world, and it's always good just to like step back, try to make sense of what's all is happening. Does it give us insight into trends? Does it tell us something important about the industry that might change what you're going to decide to do next week, next month? And to help me out to talk about these things, I have some special guests today. First up, we have Sarah Andrew Wilson. Many of you will know Sarah. And then we have got Paul Sweeney all the way from Ireland today. And my colleague, Eric Schwartz. Eric, hello.
Hi.
All right. So let's start this out. I think a lot of the people who are watching will probably know you folks, but just in case they aren't, Sarah, why don't you do
Yeah, so I'm Sarah Andrew Wilson. For the past 4 years, I was the Chief Content Officer at Matchbox.io. We are the creators of popular voice applications like Question of the Day and Kids Quiz on Amazon Alexa and Google Assistant and Samsung Bixby. And earlier this year, we were acquired by Volley.
We might talk about that today. Very interesting. Paul Sweeney.
Hey, how you doing? So Paul Sweeney, I'm a co-founder and head of product at conversational AI company Webio. We do conversational interaction for credit and collections businesses. So we're based in Ireland, mainly selling to the UK and Europe.
It sounds like your dogs are part of that too.
They're not my dogs.
Maybe that was Eric. So collections, dogs are useful in that as well as conversational AI, I've heard. Eric, tell us a little bit about you.
Yes, so I'm the head writer for Voicebot. So I've written about or covered quite a few of the stories and themes and such that we're going to talk about today in Voice AI, and you can read me regularly on the website.
Perfect. We might even see some bylines from you today. All right. Well, we'll start with you, Eric. What do you think was the top story of the first half of 2022?
Well, it was a relatively recent one, but it was Google's decision to move away from the conversational actions, essentially the Google Assistant actions or voice apps, and try to essentially shut down that third-party development path in favor of Android. I would say is definitely the biggest news for a lot of voice developers and the voice world in general.
I tend to agree that's my view, that's the biggest story of the first half. And as the market has moved past, and we're going to talk a lot about applications beyond the general purpose consumer assistants and beyond smart speakers, it's still a really important player. And I think it's so significant that they decided to remove third-party actions. So they went to the trouble of building an ecosystem of developers, and that added value to users. There's no question about it. Sarah probably has some thoughts on this. And then they just rug pulled all those people, and they said, "Oh, we already have a developer ecosystem in Android. So why do I need to have this Google Action thing too? It's hard to maintain." And as we confirmed, Eric and I, with a conversation with the product manager, there wasn't much use of those third-party actions. So really think about it. It's very logical. You look at the data, you say, "Oh, well, no one's using that. I shouldn't use that." But it strikes me as actually a strategic blunder and really a turning point in the industry. What do you think, Sarah?
Yeah, it was no surprise that this was coming. Honestly, because the messaging had been so inconsistent over the past couple of years from Google. They were like all gung ho, and that made developers super gung ho. And we created several actions, but they made it very difficult for us to have to incorporate some of the retention techniques that were very successful on Alexa. We couldn't, users couldn't store stats or, streaks or anything like that. Playing one of our apps like Question of the Day was not the full comprehensive experience on Google Assistant like it was on Alexa. Yeah, and then they seem to kind of back off on that enthusiasm in the developer community. So it
was really interesting. So they'd always had like the programs and the technology, and they'd wanted people to engage with it, but they were much less active on the developer evangelism front than Amazon, for example. Now, Amazon was maybe over the top in that, but they were much less. And then all of a sudden, in the fall of 2020, they roll out the general availability of app actions. They'd been around for about 18 months at that point, but only in like private limited beta release. They roll that out, and then they put all this budget behind doing evangelism. It was really interesting because that was at a time when Amazon was sort of cutting back on their evangelism a little bit. And then it was like Google was sponsoring all the events and getting together with developers. And they did that for a year and then basically decided, well, that didn't work. Let's move on.
Yeah. And meanwhile, we were all on the developer side, we were all still trying to be gung-ho about it and then not getting that support that was there kind of as a flash in the pan.
Just as a follow-up on that, so for your games on Google Assistant, what was the breakdown between mobile versus smart speaker?
Oh, the breakdown. Oh, so it was much more on smart speaker for sure. So we had a mobile app for folks who don't know. We had a mobile app for Question of the Day, and we developed that after we kind of did reverse. We developed that after the voice applications as a way to try to get new users in, just to see if it would work. But yeah, we had far fewer users on the app than on voice apps.
Right. But what about through Google Assistant? Could you tell in the logs whether the users came in through Google Assistant on the smartphone or on the...
Oh, I see. Yeah. So it was much more, I see what you mean. It was much more on phones, using Google Assistant on phones than using it on the smart speaker, for sure.
And here is the thing that I don't get. They saw this low data or this low usage data on the smart speaker. And then, but it was actually more than half of, I believe, all the interactions for third parties were on phones very consistently. I talked to people about this. And now, like, you're not going to be able to use those third party solutions on either one, and to like go ahead and build an Android app to replace your conversational assistant through Google Action. Like, that's a lot more work.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And you have to, for us, like when we were building, a separate mobile app, we were very used to using Voice AI, but suddenly we had to worry about graphics. So that's like, you have to build out your team even more from there.
Yeah. It's a new development platform. It's more expensive. It's more complicated. They make these crazy changes every year when they update to a new dessert with Android. And it's like, it's not, it's no longer cross-platform and all those things. But Paul Sweeney, you are in the day-to-day enterprise voice AI, conversational AI space, but you're an astute observer of the consumer side. What do you think of this?
So I was reading all the things about it as well, and I came across one word: discovery. They were looking at discovery. Discovery is the problem. Discovery is still the problem, and they had no view on how they were going to solve that problem. And that was it. Like, they just couldn't solve the discovery problem, and it's been signposted for a long time, but I think that they just didn't see how they were going to solve that problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general in this space, discovery is left up to the developer to sort out. However, I don't really think that's different than the mobile app space or anywhere else. It's really left up to the developer, but that's okay. I mean, I think, yes, no one was discovering it. They weren't getting use. In any event, we have a whole podcast on that, which people can watch. We'll put the link if people want to learn more about that. We should move on.
I think from my space, from like the enterprise customer service kind of area, you really didn't see a lot of adoption of voice interaction over speakers. So the kind of, if you remember, the use cases were, hey, I'm late for my flight. Is it on time? What gate is it at? Oh, I've just about enough time to catch a cab. Can you get me one? And it's like, I'm just running out. I've got my phone by my side and there's the cab. It wasn't that easy. And just like absolutely nothing like that ever happened.
Yes.
So I could see that the logic of work that's in public, work that you can see someone else doing, that we as monkeys learn from others. So we go, oh, that's a clever monkey. What's that monkey doing? Oh, that monkey's calling for a cab over his speaker. I should do that. And I could see that there was some case to be made that if people could see other people using these services, they would start using them. But I just, you're a marketer, you understand. Habits are really hard to change. Behaviors are really hard to change. So I think that we just went to a certain level of change, and we just never really got past that. And it's not entirely foolish to believe that something could have changed. Like when you see people, that pizza talk, when you see someone with a mobile phone walking down, holding up their pizza, chatting away to it. It's like, what are you doing? Just use headphones. Like, just hold up your... It's like, no, that's not how I think about this object. Like, I don't think about it in this way. So some form of relationship was changing. And I think it wasn't entirely foolish to believe that they're on the cusp of another platform change here. It just didn't happen. So they looked at their data. They said, this isn't happening. I've got other money. I've got money to spend on other things, namely metaverse. So let's all pivot into something that the market actually likes.
Absolutely. I understand. I think they gave up too soon, but that will be played out over time. Well, let's move on to the next topic. Why don't we give the floor to you, Paul? What do you think was the top story of the first half of the year?
Well, I'm kind of in a slightly different space than you guys. I'm in like very much in the customer service world. And I'm looking at the customer service world, and the last couple of days you see Zendesk being bought for like 10 billion, right? And it was at, let's just say, hovering at 20 billion just like 9 months ago. So you've got this company that bought Smooch for, at that time, a record breaking like 100 million for connecting to various messaging platforms. But I think that why this is important is, I think people are starting to see that the CRM space and the conversational space have a lot of disruption waiting inside of them. And if you see what's happening with like the people who are buying Zendesk, like they also own Genesis, right? That's a very big company making a lot of acquisitions in the conversational AI space. And you look at the total value of something like Salesforce, and you go, oh, okay, there's actually a very big CRM ecosystem out there that if you had a new way of doing customer service or a better way of doing customer service, there's a bit of a disruption possible there. So I think that this Zendesk acquisition could actually be one of those kind of strategic acquisitions by private equity with a target of going after a much bigger CRM market. And I really like startups that go after big existing markets because they already have an existing budget. You're already going after a spend that people are making. You're just showing them how to do it a little bit better.
Right.
So I think that might be the sneaky disruption happening under everyone's eyes. So I think that's a rather big one.
Well, Eric, we've had a lot of investment, big funding rounds, acquisitions in that customer contact center space. What are your thoughts about how that's evolving?
I mean, yeah, Paul is absolutely right that the customer service, the combination of sort of the omni-channel interactions and chatbots and conversational AI for voice and text, it exploded. During the pandemic, when the pandemic began, there was an immediate demand for this kind of technology and a rush to adopt by all kinds of industries, including some that are traditionally more cautious to do so, like healthcare. But recently, there's just been a huge wave of both funding and acquisitions. I mean, companies like GupShup, which raised just hundreds of millions of dollars over the last couple of years, and then went on a buying spree for contact centers and customer service groups in different verticals. And it's applied on the business side and also on the consumer side. Recently there's been customer service AI for restaurants has been growing thanks to there's been a new deal between with Square and SoundHound, and some of the smaller AI developers are getting some notable contracts to bring customer service AI, whether it's for ordering food or just for answering the phone. And I think that I feel like at least every other day there's at least one story I could write about tens of millions of dollars or an unknown but probably substantial amount spent on an acquisition in customer service, because frankly the technology has reached a point where it's pretty easy for a company to embed it within their existing system, and there's a sense that customers are used to it or understand it and feel comfortable with it. Even like airports and some more places that are known for customers being already a little annoyed whenever they call anyway. So I think that that's
Sure.
a huge story.
Yeah, and I think that really, I'm glad you brought this up as something to focus on, Paul. It really continues a trend from last year. I think about Yellow AI, Core AI. They both raised more than 50 million. You mentioned GupShup. That is a big existing space. We see these places that came out of the messaging or chatbot space that made the transition into the call center, and they're really having a big impact. And I think what I'm looking for, what'll be interesting going forward, is if we start seeing some of these companies that came up through conversational AI get big enough and have high enough multiples that they start buying the broader contact center or CRM spaces, because I think that's something that could be really a profound change in the market. I don't see that happening yet, because most of the players that you would want in that space are too big for them to acquire. But it's at some point that could be something, particularly if instead of just focusing on the conversational AI, they build in that CRM functionality.
Yeah.
Okay, let's turn to Sarah. Sarah, what was your biggest story of the year?
Yeah, so one headline that really stuck out to me was that Volley acquired Matchbox.
Oh, wait a second. I
Story.
have a graphic for this. Here we go.
Yeah. So that was one particular headline that stuck out at me, but also just looking at all the Voicebot headlines from the beginning of this year, it's kind of along the same lines of what everyone else has said. It's just the sheer amount of money that's being raised right now. And that's super exciting as a former, someone that used to run a startup. Super exciting to see that the space is being taken very seriously and that there's a lot of money being used in this space now. So
maybe that's maybe that's really an important headline that we should delve into. Paul, I'd be interested in your perspective, because you're more of my age. You've been around this longer, although you are younger than me, I'm sure. Just like, look at how lovely you look. The numbers that we see are just so much bigger than they used to be. And I think it's just a function of how VCs understand the space. It's understood that you need capital to win, and it's in many of these cases it's kind of all or nothing. You either win or you don't, and so it's better off, instead of just putting 5 in, putting 15 or 20 in right now. Don't go slow growth, go fast growth. And if it goes away, well, you gave it a shot. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's God, the amount of money is just phenomenal. I think it's whenever you speak to people about the fundraising, it is, it's all down to growth. Like no one is too interested in technology. Like if you come out and you do a great job of digging into some of the tech and getting down to why certain processing is working better or a certain architecture is working better. But from what I can see, like it's show me the growth, what's happening. And if you can show strong enough growth and a large addressable or a market that is even not defined yet because it's just too big, like democratizing something. If you say democratizing something, you're pretty much in a new space.
Yes.
So that means that like it's a winner take all. I mean, all these platforms are winner take all. So you've got to have a really good understanding of your focus. Like, what are you trying to achieve? Are you a platform? Are you a vertical? Are you a service? Like, what exactly are you trying to be as a company? And like, I don't know if this is a joke or not, but I often hear it. It's like, yeah, you want to be you're a service, but you need to be a product. You're a product, but you need to be a platform. Right. So the one who's going to get the most money is the one who shows that they're really a great platform. And they're going to win out there, which is like why I think that like one of the companies I keep an eye on out there is Raza. They're really good open source, really good conversational AI company. They got reasonable funding, like it was sounded like a lot at the time, but now you look at it and you go, wow, those guys could really do with like 100, 200 million more to go in there and win that space. And then you go, well, who are they going to beat? And then you look at, well, look at who's in the middle of the contact center right now. You've got Amazon, you got Google.
Yes.
These are worthy people to disrupt, and you've got a model that can do it. So I think it's not like people, definitely in Europe, different than the States. Like I've been told, hey, if you want to raise a ton of money, go to the States. Like the money's just easier to get and better valuations.
Yes.
But Europe tends to be a little bit different. I think it's changing now. I think it's like Europe is becoming more American in the funding model. But I think still over here, it's like, how are we going to win? What's the plan? Like, it's not the same kind of we'll build a plane as we go off the cliff. It's like, let's have a plan. Let's have a plan for how we're going to win here. So I think the funding is out there. It's going to be difficult for the next 12, 24 months to raise some money. But the money will be there for the right propositions as usual. And if you can show a really good path to profit, you'll always raise money. It's that one where you're pre-fund, you're pre-revenue. You've got a great like idea for a new platform that's, using Bitcoin, using Web 5, using whatever, crypto, and you're thinking, I'm going to disrupt everything with this tech. That's still going to be difficult to raise money for, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you raised some money recently. Why don't you make a comment on that? Because you did what I look at and I say that's a standard funding round that we would have seen a few years ago. I mean, right now that would be considered a seed.
Yeah.
The old days that would have been an A round, but this would be a seed round. And internally, did you have those discussions about, well, is 4 million enough, or do we need to go for 25 million? What were those discussions like?
So it was very much on the basis of, well, what do you need? Like, you can give a company 20 million, 100 million, and will they spend it well? Like, how would you spend that money, and how would you invest it, and how quickly?
I mean, you might want a boat.
I look at me. I just want books. I'm all right. I don't need a boat. I just need more books. I'll build a boat out of books. So I think our logic was very much like, how can you spend the money to get to a position, and then when you get to that position, do you have a partner who will take you to the next step, without a whole bunch of jiggery to get to that next level.
Yeah. So when you say a partner, you're talking about a funding partner.
Yeah.
You're talking about strategically taking a smaller round from someone who will be there with you in a year or 18 months, who will then be the lead for, put it $10 million check and on a $15 million round.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
And so we've developed a relationship with this funder over the Finch Capital, by the way, to give them their shout out there. They've been great. And it's working with them to like show them the whole company, show them our challenges, show them what challenges we're facing as a company, and them going, yeah, we can help with that. We we've got other companies in our fintech portfolio that we know that we can introduce you to that can help you solve problems that you're going to have along the way. And so again, like a good process, they say you should treat it like you're going to get married, because you're going to be together for, maybe a decade. So, make sure you make your choice wisely. So was it act quickly, repent at your leisure? So take your time.
Fair enough.
Right.
Fair enough. Well, Sarah, I'm interested in your position. You took a buyout offer from another company in the space. I would say they were in the same space as you, but I don't know that you were competitors because you were doing different things in the space. Gaming's one of the unique industries, kind of like that. But what were your options? Were you thinking acquisition, raise money, or just keep building as it is? And like, how did you think about that? And if you were going to raise money, how much would it have been?
So yeah, everything was on the table, and things seemed to just move very quickly in the space in terms of interest from users, interest from funders, and just over 4 or 5 years, things just moved very quickly. So everything was on the table and what direction we wanted to go in, and we were just looking at the one that we could benefit the most from, to be honest. And that eventually came down to being acquired. We got what we wanted, and Volley acquired our entire portfolio. They took on my team, my amazing team at Matchbox. They took them on. So yeah, we explored lots of different ways of continuing with Matchbox and in being acquired, and we decided that was the best way to go.
Well, if you were continuing, what would you have done?
Yeah, we were still trying to figure that out, because it seemed like user base was kind of leveling out on smart speakers. So that's when we started doing lots of different things like mobile apps. We had a podcast with an amazing team from NPR. And we were just looking at how else can we expand our reach while the smart speaker market kind of, according to Voicebot data, kind of leveled out a little bit, right? So what else could we do? So we were in the middle of all that discussion and kind of experimentation when Volley approached us.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, for folks who are watching, might not be familiar with this, smart speaker growth in the US basically flatlined over 2 years. It grew nominally, but it had been growing quickly. And to a certain extent there, it was going to be more of a market for you, Sarah, where it was getting more existing users to drive awareness as opposed to just capturing new users as well. And so it was going to be more of a dogfight. Just on the mobile app side, I know you created the mobile app. Was that iOS and Android?
Yes, it was on both.
And how was that going?
So we did get a lot of new users. Users who were not on smart speakers and just kind of discovered us, through the mobile app market. So a lot of folks who were on the smart speakers, who were playing our games on smart speakers, actually switched over to the mobile app, which is helpful for the mobile app, but not helpful for our numbers on the smart speaker.
Right.
But it's because a lot of folks didn't have smart speakers with a screen. And so they did have a phone.
Right.
And so they could see leaderboards. They could see, they could see more of their stats, that kind of thing. So it was a great experiment for us. And we learned a lot from it. But it didn't, it wasn't amazing growth. A
great experiment with unintended consequences. That's really interesting. That they switched over in that way.
It wasn't a lot, but a lot of people. It wasn't, it wasn't a significant amount, but some did switch over.
It was enough to notice, though. That's really interesting. So, just on the gaming market side, how do you see that evolving in the voice game space?
Oh, I think there's so much potential still. And I think there's still some things that aren't being done. I had this new Amazon Astro, my new house robot, And I think there's so much potential there in terms of games and lots of other apps that can be developed for it. But there's already a few games developed, I'm assuming first party, that I've already played with little Astro that are super fun. And what makes it different from the smart speaker, of course, is that Astro can move about. So, it's this little robot, looks kind of like a dog, and it can move about. Its screen is its head. It can move up and down. It has its periscope that can move up and down, that can, be used for like animation. So I think there's a lot of potential there.
All right. So so we might as well just segue into that. You've been doing a series on your experience with Astro, which you got just like a week ago. Is that right? It's really very recent.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So you've been doing this series about sort of discovering what that's about. And I noticed there was this really interesting thing that I think just came out yesterday. And that was Astro. You think about like all the things it can do. Well, one of the things it can do is it can deliver wine.
It can, yes.
So tell me about that. I don't have the full video embedded. I didn't have time to do that today, but like, I guess I missed this. It makes sense that it would be there, but there's like a little carrying space there in the back so that you can deliver from room to room.
Yeah. There is. So when you first get your Astro, your little house robot, it will map out the house. So it map out, so for us, it's the first floor. And it has very good spatial awareness. It's very impressive. It did not run into anything. Except there's one exception, and we can talk about that later. But so it maps out the house, and it figures out where it can go, where it can't go. It figures out where the doors are, the windows are, the walls are. And then you train it by saying, Astro, follow me. And it will follow you to wherever you go. And then I say, Astro, this is the dining room. And it says, okay, you want me to name this room the dining room? Yes. Then I say, follow me. And I'm like, this is the living room. So it learns what each of these spaces are. And then if you want it to deliver something like a bottle of wine to somebody or a phone that was misplaced in the house or something, you can just put it in the back of little Astro. It has an attachment. So if you have like a soda or something, it has like a cup holder that you can, hold the cups still, or you can take that out and put a bottle of wine or blocks or whatever you want to put back there. And then because it knows your rooms, you can say, take this to the kitchen, or, my husband's name is Joel. I can say, find Joel. And it has facial recognition because we've trained that. So it'll search around the house looking for Joel, and then it'll go up to Joel and he'll like pick up his whatever I'm sending to him.
Okay. I'm like really interested in your enthusiasm for this because first of all, people don't know, like, I think we may have not said this. This Astro robot is from Amazon, and I think it has Alexa in it, but it also has its own personality beyond Alexa, correct?
Yes. It is really interesting because Astro has its own kind of persona, and the way I see it is like it's a puppy / child. It's very innocent, and it seems very, it really wants to help. And it gets very excited when it sees you, when it recognizes you. And that makes me feel really good. But then when you ask it a question like, what's the weather today or something, it switches to Alexa. So I have been interacting with this little puppy-like creature, and suddenly this adult woman is speaking to me right outside of the same screen.
Right,
so it's
that's odd.
A little jarring, but I'm sure they're working on that.
It's like in a movie that would happen, but it would be like a possessed child having like channeling through it. usually a young girl like with some menacing man's voice. So
Yeah.
so I could see how that would be interesting. I think the hacks will be amazing when people do that, when it becomes like the demon Astro and stuff like that.
Yeah. I will say Astro doesn't really have a voice now that I think about it. Astro doesn't speak to you. Astro is like R2D2, like
It
beeps
makes
and-
noises. Yeah.
yeah. And it has these little facial expressions that are adorable. But then when it needs to speak your language, so for me, when it speaks English, it switches to Alexa.
Right. Which now do the eyes go away? Like what happens when Alexa's talking?
The eyes, when Alexa talks, the eyes sometimes go away. So it'll, like if I ask for the weather, it'll bring up
the weather. Yeah.
the weather. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not like there's not some personification of Alexa that's different than Astro.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. So this legitimately, the announcement of Astro was last year, right? But that's because everyone now pre-announces stuff. So I think it's more interesting now that this is shipping, and not just anybody can get this. There's like a waiting list for it. So you were lucky to be selected for the waiting list. I've noticed journalists like Eric Schwartz never get selected for the waiting list for these things. So you have to be a little bit more clever. They had Rachel do it, Eric, then you would have one now.
I mean, yeah, except my wife would not enjoy having a little robot with a red light on it following her around at night.
Yeah, but it would be fun for you. So maybe you should try
I'm totally down to get it. Yeah.
What do you think, Paul? What do you think about the social robot space? It has not been successful so far. We've had some very high profile crash and burns in this space. Amazon is certainly the best funded solution to come to market. And it's got the background of Alexa behind it and a lot of resources. Where do you think this is going?
I'm reminded of an Irish saying, which is if you see a field with no cows in it, could be poisoned. So it's there's no cows in this field, right? And there hasn't been for a long time. And then what it also reminds me of is I used to be a little bit on the investment side of things, and anytime I saw a touch screen, anything like touch screen tourism portal, blah blah blah, like forget about it. Touch screen doesn't work. Touch screen doesn't work. It never has. Kiosks doesn't work until all of a sudden it did work. So just the caveats there are things don't work until suddenly they do, and that's often a very intangible reason or difficult to predict reason why they work, or a threshold has been broken of some sort. So I think there's a number of like all the consumer excitement bits that will always be there, like show me the wine. You can see the ad now, like just the family sending things around, and you go, oh, that's kind of cute, kind of handy. You could make it a family game. It's like a dog. It's got a social structure it can sit into. I can see that, but I think there could be other problems with it, which is you're letting something into your home to map out a space, and mapping out that space is a big deal in Europe. The European Commission does not tend to like alien robots mapping out your house for attack vectors. With the other Amazon robots coming through your window. So I think there's going to be some legislative problems for them here, regardless of the value. Like they can talk about all they want about the great value, but I think they're going to have to really prove that their privacy is in order, and how they handle that. That's going to be really important. Otherwise, I think about what's the data, like what other data are they're going to get access to through this, and I don't know. I'm kind of thinking about. I remember a case study 30 years ago from a very good Japanese department store, and they used to offer free customer service. You could call them, and even if you never bought the product from them, a repairman would come to your house and repair your dishwasher. And you go, what a fantastic company! And the dishwasher guy, or the repair person, would come in, fix the dishwasher, and go, toaster's broken, clocks are broken, chairs are 10 years old. And what they've done is that for the cost of 40 euros of getting the guy to your house, they've just basically scanned out all the important products that you have in your house and how old they are. And they're willing to make you an offer. And so, obviously that paid. So you know where that story's going. If if you invite someone into your house to be a servant, don't be surprised when Amazon goes, "Have you thought about toasters lately?"
Well, actually, it's even better because you're basically paying $1,000. Well, how much was that, Sarah?
I got the introductory price, which was $9.99.
Okay, so it's even better. You're paying
Under $10.
$1,000 for Amazon to collect that data about your home. This
is really
is
interesting.
a business
I
model.
figure, I order everything on Amazon anyway. Fast, free shipping. They know everything I eat. They know everything that I'm ordering from Amazon. So they have all that information about me. And now they can see all the products I've bought not on Amazon. They can see the furniture that I've bought.
Yes.
Right? They can see clothing. They can see artwork. They can see rugs. They can see all that. I will say that thinking of the friends and family that I've introduced little Astro to, the reaction is very different in terms of privacy than when I introduced smart speakers to friends and family. Immediately with smart speakers, people are like, "Oh, that's listening all the time. I would never have one of those in my house." And now when I'm introducing Astro, not a single person has asked about privacy. And this is even more invasive.
I was like, isn't it worse? You've got a camera following you around the house all day.
So I got out of the shower the other day and I was going to run down to the kitchen and grab something and run back up. And I was actually like, nope, I'm getting fully dressed because Astro's down there. And
that's right. It's like having a house guest.
Right.
Well, one day it's going to turn around and go, "Daddy and you argue a lot. I think you should buy Daddy some aftershave."
Or would you like to try this therapy skill or something?
Oh, geez. I don't know. I mean, Andrew or Eric, you've spent a lot of time chronicling the history of robots in this space.
Yeah.
You and I both. I mean, what are your thoughts on this? You're a consumer product aficionado.
Well, I mean, I keep thinking about how Amazon recently showed off an early version of the option to give Alexa any voice you want. So, it could literally be, your mother's voice telling you to buy healthier food while it's following you around and watching you eat.
Better that than Samuel L. Jackson. That's all I like.
I mean, I would listen to Samuel L. Jackson if Astro was warning me about snakes invading my home or something. But yeah, I think that element is going to make it the robot experience possibly more popular, just because that bit of customization, I think, makes people more invested in the technology. The way that everyone's smartphone is different and has different apps and a different look to it. I think if you can do the same with your robot, at least with voice, you'll find that people feel more comfortable with it, or feel like they have more control over it, rather than it being just sort of an invasive presence, as I'm sure some people feel. So I think that's going to change things.
Got it. Okay, let's put a bow on that one. If people want to check out more about that, at Sarah Andrew Wills on Twitter, you can see that. Or actually, I think Eric's going to put a story up on Voicebot, which will give you easy access to that. But thank you. You're like a robot anthropologist. We appreciate you doing this service for society. When the singularity comes, I don't know if the robot overlords will like what you've done or not, but I have a feeling they're going to look on it favorably because you are very enthusiastic about Astro.
It's hard not to be, because it is so cute.
That's right.
And big eyes, just so adorable.
That's how they draw you in. The same thing with puppies. They draw you in. You're like, oh, they're so cute. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. They're a lot of work. Okay, so I think we should move on to another topic. And this is, we'll call this a theme, or like one of a theme. We're going to talk about a couple different examples here. But we'll use this example of rain. So they raised $11 million. They're building. So many people, if they know Rain Agency, they started out building Alexa skills and being sort of one of the first agencies to become a voice assistant, conversational AI first agency. They had been doing things like websites and things like that before, and they abandoned all that work. And then more recently, they started building out a solution, which is for these deskless workers, but it's essentially a custom voice assistant. And so, Eric, you've written about this space a lot, and you've definitely written about Rain. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you think about this specific investment and what's going on in that space?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was definitely a sharp pivot, I would say, by Rain from their earlier iteration of the company, but it makes sense because one of the interesting things about voice compared to some other technology is that rather than starting in the sort of enterprise or business space and then trickling down to consumer level, voice has often seemed to start at the consumer level and then transitioned into enterprise as people become more used to it. So this is essentially that concept applied to industrial workers or people working in factories, where the idea is that you have the ease of access of information and guidance that you would from a consumer voice assistant, but applied to things like car repair or manufacturing. And instead of Rain's big pitch is the idea is that instead of having to like flip through a big either paper book or trying to scan through a large PDF, you can quickly access the information you want through a conversation and with a voice assistant that can understand what you're trying to do and help guide you through it. And I think that there's going to be a lot of interest in that from companies and from even from smaller companies that want to essentially just be more efficient and apply voice that way. And the deskless worker, as they call it, are those people who can't necessarily easily look things up on a laptop or on a regular computer. And I think that Rain is trying to be ahead on in that regard, and their venture partners represent that. So they got money from Stanley Ventures as part of Stanley Black & Decker, which again is all about building and repairing hardware. And I think that there's going to be more emphasis on this going forward. I don't know precisely if this is going to end up being one brand or if it's going to be the sort of the white label custom voice assistant approach, which I suspect it'll be the latter. But I definitely think that understanding how to interact with the voice AI is going to be a sort of a part of the basic toolkit for factory workers in the not too distant future.
Yeah. So, Paul, you're in this custom agent, conversational AI agent space. What do you think about either this funding or more broadly around this idea of custom assistants?
So just to comment on the last bit, Eric, I think it's fascinating actually. Like we see these big manuals for machines or for whatever, and if you think about it, it's a huge investment. It's poorly used. People generally have to be a particular type of person to actually go through it and figure it out. So that's a real problem that people are already spending money on, that I can see if I could just ask the assistant and it told me what's likely to be wrong with this machine, given that sound or, given the last maintenance schedule on it. So I like the term deskless because it brings forth the kind of idea of hands-free. And I remember Brett, at the last ConverCon, there was a presentation by Kainos from Northern Ireland. They were building a solution for mechanics to do MOT tests, the annual safety check on a car. And what they did is they built a solution for someone to be able to walk around the car and do a verbal assessment of the car. And it was totally accurate. It was much faster. It was a whole bunch of things going for it. But one of the things it also found was that the people working in that environment tended to have a higher level of dyslexia than other people. And they went, oh, hold a second, this actually really helps people do their jobs. And I said that to someone else in Ireland, and they were with a hairdressing platform, software platform. And they went, oh yeah, we absolutely know that a large portion of our client base also have dyslexia because of the way forms are filled out, et cetera. So I just say it by way of it seems an obvious fit that this would work. There's an existing problem there, and I think it'll surface other other information about the workflow that maybe you don't have right now. So I think that's very interesting. From a custom assistance point of view, we've had a view in Webio that financial data is important, and that people running financial services will want to have end-to-end control over their data and where it goes. And that's every bit of the stack. So there's no point in saying to someone, yeah, we're all secure up until here, and then we throw it over to Google, and then it comes back here. What was that middle bit? Yeah, we bring it over to Google, and then they send it back, and they go, oh no, we don't want you to do that. No, it's perfectly secure. Yeah, we're not doing that. So if you're a large retailer, a large financial institution, you really care about where your data goes. So that means you kind of want to go the way of a custom assistant. And the way we look at it is there's this kind of, there's a natural tendency for us to look at the new shiny thing. Like, I know we're going to talk about some hot new topics, hopefully in a while, but the one that kind of creeps up on everyone is we look at this live chat everywhere. So, oh, okay, I'm on a website, I'm a bit stuck, I click on the chat, I go, oh crap, they just want my email and someone's going to call me. Ugh, right, that was useful. And then sometimes you get one that kind of works and you go, well, I got a little bit of the way there, I guess I'm going to call them now, and yada yada, right? So what's happened is you've got real estate now on all the websites and everywhere in the world. Everyone knows how to use it, and no one's really attached the conversational interaction element to it properly in the back end. And then, like, it's not hard to think, like, once you're doing that, well, then what next? This is, well, it really should be why are we talking about it as live chat, right? It's like I could be talking to it, I could be interacting with it, it could pop a screen, so it's a digital assistant. So what you have is you've got this future digital assistant on every web property in the world, and like give it away to Google or give it away to Amazon or whoever. It's like that's your front door, and you're going to want to control the experience as much as possible all the way through to providing a service, or interacting from an information point of view is kind of understandable, but you also want to transact and service properly. Like, I want to change the date of my, like, I can just say to someone, I want to change the date that my yep, okay, that's done, change the date. Okay, anything else you want to do? Like, you should be able to do all that from a front end digital assistant. So our view is that that's exactly what's going to happen, and we're doing very tight connections. And so you're on mute there, right?
Yeah, I wasn't talking, but I think you might be having a little internet jitter. So we're
okay.
Maybe it was just me, but catching a little bit of dropout there. But yeah, I got the general gist of it. So I think, if we look at this space in general, I think you nailed it. I mean, like, there's that one piece that everyone sort of gets, and that is, oh, I probably should own the data, right? And so that might not be the compelling reason to create a custom assistant, but when you do create one, it's clear that it's not really going to Google, it's not really going to Amazon long term. A lot of people start there,
yeah,
use their services initially, yeah. And I think that we're going to find that there's a significant infrastructure layer that the big tech folks actually control, because once people it's the fastest way to get started. Usually less expensive to get started that way. Not always, but usually less expensive. But over time, I think there's a lot of really interesting companies out there, whether it be DeepGram or Rasa or some of these other players, where you can have a little bit more control over it, and then ultimately you're going to have not just that control over the data, but you're going to have control over the user experience, and training the model specifically for your use case. And I think that's something that's really interesting to me in your space. the vocabulary and nomenclature is so specific about what you're doing for those financial services companies that it's going to be something that a generic solution that you don't have the full access to train the language model is going to struggle a bit.
So we kind of agree, but I think there's other parallels to other things you talk about. So you know the way you talk about where the processing is going on, the ASR and the NLP, right, and that doing it in a different way makes it faster. I think a similar thing is going on with the data, the APIs, and the dialogue manager, in that if you can create like a context engine more than anything else, you're saying like, where am I in a conversation? Like I kind of use this one with my team, which is at the beginning of a conversation, I might say something like, I can't pay. And that means I don't have the money to pay. Like I don't have the money right now to pay. But if I'm at the end of a conversation and I say I can't pay, probably has to do with something to do with the payment gateway. It's like, I can't pay. It's not working. It's not going through. It's not taking my data correctly. So just where I am in the conversation is context, and what's gone before and what I'm likely to try and do in that conversation from a kind of projection of what the outcome of this conversation is going to be. So we look at that as like slow, like you can't run at that at 100 miles an hour. Like you've got to build those layers, and so we're building all that ourselves. As counter to the market as that might seem, we took a view a couple of years ago that we want to own that conversational AI, lock, stock, and barrel, everything about it, and so we're building that. We'll have our own like dialogue manager, and then we'll integrate the two and create like those really tight experiences, because ultimately, you know, that shows up at the front end. Like it's just, oh, that's just a little easier, or that's smoother, or I didn't have to repeat that, or they remembered that. Oh, that's kind of nice. So it's just going to show up after all that effort of building this stuff. It's just going to sound, oh yeah, it's a really kind of convenient, easy to use service that feels nicer to use. And you go, it's a lot of work. It's a hell of a lot of work to get there, right? But that's what you end up with.
Well, in talking about conversational assistants or custom assistants, you know, Sarah, there's another big story that hit this year, and that is SoundHound went public. And they went public at a big valuation. Now, they've been up and down. I don't know what they are today. I think they were up as much as 1.8 billion. Maybe it's retreated a little bit to $1 billion. You know, obviously there's been sell-off in the market. So, but they went up and down, and they actually had some weird crash, which Eric might comment on. But what are your thoughts on this in terms of the custom assistants and maybe SoundHound in particular, as maybe now as a public company with, you know, another, I think 145 million or something they raised when they went public, maybe a key alternative for a general purpose assistant for enterprises looking to roll something out?
Yeah, so I mentioned this to you, Brett, before today, which is I've been on sabbatical since the acquisition of Matchbox. So to be honest, I haven't been following this space over the past 3 months. So I apologize for not having some really well thought out thoughts for you on that. But I think custom assistants in general, I think it's for all the use cases you all have talked about so far, it all makes sense in terms of controlling your data, and also learning if you're using them for your employees to use for their work. You can learn a lot from your employees about if they keep asking the same questions of the voice assistant, the custom voice assistant, then you can use that in your training. You're like, oh, employees really need to know more about this, and you're able to collect all that data yourself. So
I just add a point there, Sarah. You're spot on in that. One of the things that we found was post-pandemic, during the pandemic, then after pandemic, was companies were even more concerned about having an assistant help their assistants, help their human assistants, because they found it impossible to hire people. I mean, it was hard to hire before, now it's impossible. So when you're speaking to these companies, it isn't just, oh, I can get this cheaper somewhere else, or someone else is, trying to get you on cost. It's like, actually, we need someone who can help us automate this work because the agents aren't there to do it. And I need to help the agents who are there. So you're seeing intelligent assistance for your agents as a slew of new products coming out in 2022. It's a much heavier emphasis for the contact center companies, and I think you'll see that continue. And maybe, Eric, that assistant to employees kind of fits into that custom assistant play there as well. It's like, how do we make employees more effective, and maybe that translates then into better customer service too.
Yeah, there's definitely those answer bots that they have for basically HR questions that have become really popular. In fact, we did some analysis last year on some of the chatbot space, in particular, chatbot, smart messengers, virtual agents that are doing text-based. And there's this whole new industry that grew up of this segment, which is really just serving an employee Q&A function. And there's been some companies that have grown pretty fast. They've gotten some big funding on that. Now, what we also see is some of the other conversational AI companies who are in the contact center, who are extending to that space. So that's essentially a voice assistant, but it's not assisting people, right? So there's a distance between this. I think we've talked about this assistance with a C or with a T at the end. But I think that's really important what you're talking about in terms of the assistant that helps you through the process. And this is no different than the deskless workers we were talking about. They basically have their little buddy, whatever that is, virtual buddy, to take notes for them, right? Or to enter data for them. And we've seen this for years in healthcare. And then we're now seeing this in the call center. And this is actually, I don't know how many people have actually implemented it, but it seems like the most popular thing to talk about for anybody who's doing conversational AI in the call center, and not just to be able to answer questions before someone talks to a live agent, but once there's a live agent, continuing to listen and then pulling up the data that the live agent will need, because you need those agents to be more productive because there aren't other agents. So you need to have the queue shorter. And the other thing is those agents are young or newer in their role. They're less experienced because the turnover's been higher. And so it's always been high in that space, but now you've got even a bigger problem with turnover. So I think that's, and maybe Eric, you can jump in on this, because one of the things that we saw in the restaurant space, we've had a lot of news around these assistants for restaurants, whether it be answering the phone to take orders or at the drive-through. 2 years ago, they were saying, oh, this will help you improve customer service, make it easier on your employees. And today their pitch is totally different. It's like, oh, this will enable you to actually fulfill the roles that you can't hire people for.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think SoundHound is actually an interesting, example of that sort of shift, because SoundHound's always been, neutral in terms of like the venues it operates with or the kinds of companies it works with. And I think it's telling that voice has become so much a necessity for so many kinds of businesses, where the question is not, will voice help us? The question is how much voice or how much conversational AI do we need to maintain parity with some other companies? I mean, the fact that, again, going back to SoundHound, the fact that their recent partners include, Square for restaurants, and Hyundai for cars, and Vizio for TVs, and Snapchat for captioning videos for social media. I mean, the necessity of technology that can handle voice, or that can do things that people want done more quickly than a human could do it, or more efficiently, is just part of how people expect to deal with companies. I think of it as like, maybe not quite at the level of every company needs a phone number or an email address, but definitely on the level of every company needs a social media presence in order to compete with any other rivals. And the same thing goes for voice. If you're if you get used to the idea of calling a restaurant for a reservation and having it always be answered if only by an AI that can take your reservation, then the next time you call a restaurant and it goes to a busy signal, you're not going to have you're not going to think of that restaurant first next time you're looking to go out. So I think there's going to be I think that's the real shift, is that voice is not an extra or a luxury or a forward thinking technology. It's a necessity for business, period.
Yeah, so I feel like there's so many trends that are going on that we didn't get to, but we're sort of coming to the end of our conversation. You guys have been very patient in doing this. I'll just mention a couple trends just for people who are listening, so you might look at this. Like, one thing to keep in mind that I think is really interesting is the rise of synthetic speech, and particularly the new places that's being used in media. It's being used in enterprise applications. There's a lot of funding going into that space because there's this idea that the rise of custom assistants, what comes next? You need custom voices. And so that seems like a good bet. And there's a few players who are doing some really interesting work there. There's been a lot of acquisitions as well. Spotify just made an acquisition. Veritone made an acquisition in that space. And so, shout out to everybody who's been laboring away. And yeah, I think it was what has been viewed historically as less sexy part of the space, but a really important component. And now it actually is kind of sexy because they're in all these movies and everything, and like a core part of that. Another trend, which we're not going to get to today, but I think is really interesting, is virtual humans, and then ultimately how some of those show up in metaverse spaces. So maybe those will be for a conversation later in the year. Maybe very specific about those, because those are fun. We didn't even get to automotive or any of these other things. So I think there's some people have a feeling like there's like a winter going on in the conversational AI space. And from my perspective, nothing could be further from the truth. We just see all of this activity that's been going on, big investment, new applications, companies getting acquired. So I'm really excited about what's going to happen in the second half. I'll just let everyone wrap up here. Paul Sweeney, what are you looking forward to seeing in this space? What do you think would be sort of an interesting activity for the second half of the year?
I'm still fascinated by the large language sets and what comes out of that.
We didn't talk about GPT-3 or DALL-E or
Lambda or all these guys.
Lambda, yes. Is Lambda's? The biggest story could have been: is Lambda actually sentient?
We can't answer that. Am I here? I don't know. Are you there? I don't know. It's an existential question that you have to have wine to speak about. We're European now. So what I would say is that's the interesting thing for me, is that what's the really kind of breakthrough vector here? It's that big data set stuff and what happens in there. I think that's the core thing to keep your eye on.
All right, Eric, what are you looking forward to in the second half of the year?
I think what you were saying about the combination of the virtual humans and the synthetic voices. I'm working on a piece right now about how we've reached the level where the FBI is putting out warnings about people using synthetic speech to fake their way into doing job interviews, essentially, in order to gain access to companies. And it's reached the point where if the technology reached the point where it can be used, misused for cybercrime, then it's definitely at the point where the average person is going to be seeing it in all of their in their media a lot more. And I think tying it to conversational AI and the metaverse and so on. I mean, the question of whether you're talking to a bot or an AI instead of a human is going to become more of something that everyone has to ask themselves when they're interacting digitally in a way that has been sort of not relevant until now.
Yeah, fair enough. Sarah.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to the second half of my sabbatical for the rest of this year. But no, I'm also, you mentioned, the idea of voice winter. And I didn't believe that when people were saying that back in 2017, 2018, like voice is not a novelty. Like people were saying that too. Voice is, it's being incorporated in all of our lives. It has been incorporated. So taking that one step further, my new house robot, I'm really curious to see the new use cases that come out of that, and to see that being opened up to developers and what developers can come up with, like, third party, see what use cases they come up with. So, and I want to see more adoption. I'm curious to see how others are using their house robots, because little Astro is cute, and it's really the first, one out, that will be, I think, the more popular one, but it's just the beginning, right?
Yes.
Like we're all going to have house robots. We don't know what they're all going to look like and how we're going to use them, but this is just the beginning. So I'm really curious to see how this gets adopted in the next 6 months.
Well, I'm waiting for the application where Astro actually fixes the dishwasher.
Yeah.
Like the retailer in Japan used to do, because it basically has all the same functions. It can look around. And I'm also interested in finding out when on Astro's face, they start saying, "Oh, looks like you could use a new toaster."
It's coming. It's coming.
I noticed that toaster was built in 2004. There's this great special right now for Alexa deals.
It's coming. It's coming.
All right. So I really am intrigued by so many things that are going on. There's a lot of things around metaverse and virtual beings, which I think are very important and will make progress this year. But maybe the biggest trend is this idea of the assistant that's alongside you and not across from you. And so we think about the assistants that we've had to date. You speak to them, they speak back to you. And so it's like you're facing them, right? They're a separate entity, and they're helping you, but they're not participating with you. And this talk about the deskless worker, I think is a good example of this. That comment you said about, Paul, around the people who were doing the car inspections. We know this from agriculture. Ag Voice has been doing this. And I think there's actually a lot of really interesting metaverse applications for this as well. So it's both physical world and virtual world. And so that's the thing that I'm most interested in seeing how it develops. And this idea of the complementary assistant that collaborates with you, as opposed to just responds to you.
Brett, I like that. The assistant that isn't across from you, but is beside you.
Yes.
I'm going to start saying that. Can I steal that?
Absolutely. And well, I think that's in many ways, that's what Astro is designed to be.
Yeah.
Whereas Alexa is not that.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Okay, folks, I'm Brett Kinsella, the host of the Voicebot podcast. Thanks for coming out each week. We have amazing guests like the people here assembled today who share their insights on the industry. Every once in a while, we get a chance to talk about the news of the day. And that's a really good reset for us to sort of think about where we are and where we're headed, because the news actually is often an important reflection of that. Check out all the new things we're doing. We have this great new series called 10 Minutes On. So go to the Voicebot video channel. Just go to YouTube. Voicebot has a channel there. 10 Minutes On. You know what we're doing? We're doing these simple conversations with or 10-minute conversations with leaders in the industry, innovators, and it's focused. It's a single topic, 10 minutes, and it's really easily digestible. So you guys can see that in video form. One of the things we realize is two things. Well, there's a lot of really interesting stories in the space that aren't getting covered because they're not news. It's like a feature of something else, or it's an enterprise that doesn't feel like they need to tell people. It's not like Amazon and Google saying, oh, we have to tell everybody what's going on. So this was a way for us to get some more of those use cases out there and some focus on them. And then also we recognized that there wasn't that much good video content in the space because it's voice. And so everyone's just talking all the time. And so we wanted to be able to do that, provide that multimedia. So check that out, 10 Minutes On. First guests we had on was from Speechly. They're talking about voice as a feature as opposed to the assistant. There's a really interesting paradigm there. Just out today, Volkswagen is talking about an assistant that they have outside the car to sort of help the driving experience when you're not driving, which is sort of a novel concept. We have SoundHound coming up, DeepGram, Voicify. There's a lot of really interesting things, all new applications that I think people will find novel and interesting. So check that out, 10 minutes on, and come back next week for another set of amazing guests. But right now, give us your feedback at Brett Kinsella on Twitter, at Paul Sweeney on Twitter, at Sarah Andrew Wills on Twitter, and at Eric H. Schwartz on Twitter. Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks, Brett.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.